Hi, this is Steve from Open Flight Solutions, and this video is going to show you how to assemble a flight box with AHRS. In the kit, you'll find the box, the actual case, a power cable, a set of antennas along with a set of pigtail cables, a hardware kit, an envelope with a data card, a sticker for the top, a set of either one or two radio receiver modules, depending on whether you have a single band or dual band, the Raspberry Pi computer, and the AHRS board. A few simple tools you'll probably want for assembling the flight box. A Phillips head screwdriver, preferably with a number 1 magnetic tip. A common set of household scissors, super glue, a pair of needle nose pliers, a X-Acto knife, and optionally a set of 5/16 inch wrenches. Before you begin assembly, take all of the hardware out of the hardware kit and make sure that you have all the components. You should have 4 long screws, which are used to connect the to attach the fan to the top, 4 nuts, also used to attach the fan to the top, 3 standoffs, nylon spacers, which are used to hold the board, the AHRS board, to the Raspberry Pi, 3 small flathead screws, which are used to hold the case on, or the top of the case onto the bottom of the case, 3 1/4 inch panhead screws, and 1 3/16 inch panhead screw. They look almost the same. One is just slightly shorter than the others. The first step in assembling your flight box is to put the fan onto the top. You'll notice that the top of the case has 4 countersunk holes for the 4 long screws. The fan has 4 pockets for the 4 nuts that we're going to be holding it on with. And you'll see that the plastic sticker goes up against the plastic on the top of the fan so that the fan blows out. It exhausts through there. You're going to want to put 1 nut into 1 pocket, use 1 screw as an anchor, sort of start it through like so, and then using your screwdriver, loosely tie it in place. Then you're going to want to repeat that on the opposite corner diagonally. Put another nut into a pocket, put another screw in, and use that to secure the fan loosely. Then repeat on the other 2 pockets and screws. Once you have all 4 of those in place, go around and tighten them up gently. You want them to be snug. You don't want to over-tighten because that can crack the pockets or the fan base. Once that's been done, the next thing you're going to want to do is use a single drop of super glue on each one of those nuts to prevent them from backing down and dropping onto the motherboard, which could short it out. Again, only 1 drop is all it takes on each of the 4 nuts. Now, what you're going to want to do is set that aside and allow that glue to dry completely, because super glue is caustic and it can cause problems if it drips onto your Raspberry Pi motherboard. The next step in assembling this is to attach the ground plane tape to the bottom of the box. You'll see there's 4 bosses in here. The thing we've got to do when we install the ground plane tape is make sure that we cut around it so that the tape, which is metal, does not ride up on top of those bosses, as that can short out the Raspberry Pi. That is one of the most common causes for failure in a flight box assembly. The metal tape you'll find inside the assembly guide. It's simply a piece of aluminized duct tape, and you're going to insert it into the box starting at the far end where the U-channel is. So set it in there like so, so that it hits in the corner. And then you're going to want to run your thumb up, as you're going to put it into the corner at the far end. You're going to want it so that it's actually touching where these 2 holes are, where the antenna bulkhead connectors come through, because that's how they tie off to the ground. So come in here with your fingers to sort of mark where each of those 4 bosses are on the bottom of the box, and then take your tape out. Use a pair of scissors to cut well around where those bosses are on the bottom. It doesn't matter if you lose a bit of metal here. Far better that than you possibly short something out. So Put a nice big snip around on either end here. All right. Once you've got the tape sort of cut like this, you're going to start by peeling it. It's a little bit difficult to get started, but once you've got it started, you're then going to set it down so that it fits over and around those bosses, just like you see here. You want it to be as smooth as possible because, again, anything that sticks up could touch the bottom of the Raspberry Pi and cause a short. Once you have the backing starting to come off, you're going to want to peel it just past that first set of cuts that you made. And then you're going to want to center those cuts up over the bosses that you're trying to go around and adhere that end to the bottom of the box. Push it down so that it's nice and smooth. And remember, you want it into the corner on this end, and then it's going to go up the face on this other end where the two holes are for the antenna antenna bulkhead connectors. So then just simply run your thumb along as you lay the tape down, and then when you get up to this far end, try and work it into the corner as best you can so again it doesn't stick up where it could short. It will stick very well. Once you have it down, it is not coming back up. So smooth it on there. Run your fingers over it all the way around. You might use a credit card or something to try and get it into the corner as tightly as possible. And then as you run your fingers across the front, you'll see it lets you see where the two holes are for the bulkhead connectors and for that little screw. We're just going to use a screwdriver to pop that, and then these. You can probably find a pencil or something to do the same. And then once that is all done, you're going to trim off the excess here on the edge. Trim off any remaining metal, like so, and discard. At this point, you have the ground plane tape installed, smoothed, and in place. For this next step, you'll need several pieces. For the moment, we're going to set the case bottom and the case top aside, allowing the glue on the nuts on the case top to continue to dry. You're going to need the Raspberry Pi computer, the data card that comes in this little manila envelope. We're going to need the two radio modules and the two sets of pigtails, or pairs of pigtails that came with the kit. Start by removing the Raspberry Pi from its envelope. The Raspberry Pi has a number of pieces which are rather important. The 40-pin header where our AHRS board will connect, the power connector, an HDMI connector which we don't use, and an audio connector which we also don't use. But it's important to know what they are and where they go because those are going to fit into the cutouts for the power, HDMI, and audio connector on the box. You can see down in there. Next step you're going to want to do is take your data card and insert it into the sleeve down here on the bottom. This little guy right here. The card only goes in one way. Do not force it. It should slide in simply. And once it's in there, it should be nice and secure. The next thing we're going to want to do is put our radio modules on. Take the two radio modules out of the little static bag, and you'll notice that one is marked as 978 and the other is marked as 1090. This one is 978 for the 978 megahertz UAT band, and this one is 1090 for the 1090 ES band. We're going to plug those into the two bottom USB ports. We put the 978 in the bottom center USB port, and we put the 1090 in the bottom right USB port. They'll fit together, should be nice and neat at that point. And set that aside for a second. The next thing we're going to want to do is remove the dust caps from our pigtail cables. We can actually discard those. You can keep them around if you like, but they tend to fall off pretty easy. Remove all of the hardware. Set it aside because we'll be using some of it again in just a moment. So the pigtail cable has two ends to it. One has an SMA connector. This will go through the wall of your case, and that's going to be where the antenna actually connects. And then there's an MCX connector at the other end, and that connects up to the MCX connectors on the end of the Raspberry Pi's radio modules. So we'll connect these up, doesn't matter which goes to which, just like so. At that point, we've got the basics of our core assembly put together. Our next step is actually to insert the Raspberry Pi assembly into the case. But before we do that, we actually need to get ready. There are, you'll see, 3 panhead screws that are slightly longer. Those are 1/4 inch panheads, and 1 shorter screw, that's a 3/16 inch. You're going to want to prepare to put this together by taking each one of these standoffs and taking one of the longer, the 1/4 inch panhead screws, and twisting the screw in. Repeat for all 3 of these, because we're going to use this in order to tighten the screws into place as we assemble the box. The standoffs, along with the 1 3/16 inch screw, are what hold the Raspberry Pi assembly to the bottom of the case. To assemble this, we're going to want to start by laying the Raspberry Pi assembly carefully into the box. Now again, remember we've got our cutouts for power, HDMI, and audio, and we're going to line up the power, HDMI, and audio jacks on the board with those, and then we're going to carefully kind of wiggle the board back and forth until it drops into place. You shouldn't have to force it. It should go in relatively easily, like so. Now you see that it's laying down. You can actually see all 4 of our screw points on it. The next thing we're going to do is tie it down. Now we're going to use our little 3/16 inch screw, the shortest of those 4 panheads, right here next to the audio jack, between that audio jack and this Ethernet connector, which we don't use. So, use your magnetically tipped screwdriver, pop that in there, and tighten it down. The other 3 positions are actually going to get a standoff, because this is actually where we're going to hold down the AHRS board once we get it installed. So to do that, it doesn't work quite so magically with the magnetism, but set it in there and carefully twist it down. You'll feel it sort of tapping the side of the power connector a little bit as that one goes in. And then repeat for the other 2 screw points. And there you see, got 1, 2, 3 standoffs and 1 screw holding our Raspberry Pi assembly to the bottom of the case. So now that we have our Raspberry Pi assembly in place, we're going to need to remove those 3 panhead screws from the 3 standoffs. To do this, the easiest way is to take a pair of needle nose pliers, carefully, gently grip the standoff just to keep it from rotating as you remove the screw, and spin it back out. Repeat for the other 2 standoffs. At this point, we have our standoffs in place and the screws are out of them. That's where we'll actually mount the screws for the AHRS board here in just a moment. Again, you may want to take a second and use your needle nose to square up those ends so you've got as much space there as possible, because it makes it a little easier to install the AHRS board. Before we can install the AHRS board, we still have to do one more thing, and that's route those pigtail cables. And you'll see 978 megahertz cable sticks up here, 1090 over here. 978, we're going to turn over to the side, push up against the wall. We're going to actually place it in between that Ethernet jack and the wall of the case, and then simply pop it out through the end there. The 1090 is actually going to come over here in between the Ethernet jack and the USB connector, and it's going to go out on the other side. And again, make sure that it comes out cleanly, sits down, and before we can go any further, we're going to want to put those on and tighten them up using the hardware that came with them. Now, they came with a nut and a traditional lock washer. That's a cut ring lock washer you see right there. That's rather thick and it takes up a little bit more thread than we like, so typically I discard these and just use only the star-shaped lock washer that you see here. We will put the star-shaped washer on, and then the nut, and hand tighten. And then at this point, you're going to want to use your needle nose to hold the inside carefully, Well, you use either a 5/16 wrench or a 5/16 socket to tighten up the rest of the nut. Now you want to get this good and snug because you don't want your antennas to rotate, spin, flop around, but you also don't want to break anything inside, so be careful when you're doing this to get it tight. Also, don't over tighten those nuts because you can strip them, and then again your antennas will flop around. All right, now you can see we've got our cables routed. We have everything pushed down and out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is put the AHRS board on. The AHRS board comes wrapped again in a static bag. Go ahead and tear that open and remove it. And you'll see that the AHRS board has a number of components in it as well. There's a battery that's pre-installed on this version of the AHRS board. There's an antenna connector for a remote or external GPS antenna. There's a fan connector over here. We're going to use the fan connector, of course, for our fan. And if you purchase the external GPS antenna, the remote-powered GPS antenna, we're going to install the pigtail cable for that. Now, if you do not intend to use that remote-powered GPS antenna, do not install the pigtail cable, because you'll see that it routes right across the front of the onboard GPS antenna, which is this little chip you see right there, and that can actually cause problems with reception. So the next thing we're going to do is you'll see that we've got this 40-pin socket on the bottom of our AHRS board, and we have our 40-pin header there. There's really only one way this goes, and you want to make sure you get it lined up right because you've got to get it into the box. And it's a good tight squeeze, but it should go straight on and sit down right on top of our 3 standoffs there. You should be able to hold it by the battery and have it not fall off. That means that the little slip connectors on those 40 pins are locked in place. Then, once you've got that done, you're going to use those 3 screws here, here, and here to hold it down onto the hold the board down onto the standoffs. Okay, and there we have it. It is latched down. Now, if you have purchased the remote-powered antenna, it will come in a bag just like this, and you'll have the antenna, and in there with it is an extra pigtail cable. This pigtail cable is going to connect there, and then you're going to route it out through this hole on the top. Now, in this case, we're not going to install it, but ordinarily, again, remove the dust cap, remove the extra hardware, discard that lock washer, and simply insert it through there, through the hole that you see, pop it out, tie it down carefully. Be careful not to break the light pipes here. Those are what allow the LEDs that are on the board to be displayed outside. And if you break those off, it's really kind of hard to see which one is lit and which one is not. So that is how you would attach the external GPS antenna. Now, in this case, we don't need it, so all we're going to do is connect up our power for the fan. And you'll see that there's a little notch on one side of this that fits, or pardon me, a little bead on one side that fits with a notch on one side of that. It only goes one way and clicks into place. Now again, keep that cable back towards the radio modules because you don't want it overshadowing or sitting across the GPS antenna that's there. And then you should simply set down the case top on top. Now again, before you do that, make sure that the glue has dried on those 4 nuts, because you don't want liquid super glue dripping around inside of your case. Once we've got the top seated on there, make sure that it seats properly. It should sort of snap into place, and you're going to tie it down with a screw through here, and through there. There are 3 of them. If the top is sitting level and proper, they should go in pretty easily, and just tighten up again to skin tight. Do not over tighten these guys, because if you break loose the components inside that hold them in place, the little inserts in the plastic, then it becomes devilishly difficult to remove them. Here we go. All right, we now have a FlightBox with AHRS assembled. Now, one more step. These come with a sticker, and the sticker is going to line up so that it goes around the outside of your fan here, and it lines up perfectly with the edges of the 3 LEDs. So you have ADS-B, GPS, and power. So simply peel back the material, set it in place. It will let you move it around as long as you don't push it down too hard. Get it lined up the way you want, and then push it down. And there you have it. Once you've got it put together, still need to attach the antennas. Now, if you'll recall, we have two types of antennas, and if you look at the base of the antennas, you'll see that it's actually marked as to which is which. This one is 1090 and this is 978. Now, if you recall the way we routed everything, our 978 megahertz radio ran around this outside edge and comes out here. So 978 is closest to the power jack. You might want to simply go down here on the bottom and write 978 and 1090, just like you have on the antennas. So again, 978 on this guy is the one that's almost directly below the hole for that little GPS connector, and 1090 is the other one. So this is the 1090 antenna, and you do want to make sure you get these right because the antennas are tuned for a specific frequency, just the way the receiver modules are configured to receive a particular frequency. So get those on there, get them reasonably tight, twist around, and then you can pop them up. And there you have an assembled receiver with AHRS. Now, one last thing to show you. I mentioned that this little thing here is the power input. Each one of these comes with a power cable. You're going to want to connect that up. The micro USB end connects here. Adjust your antennas. Plug that in, and after about 30 seconds, you should see some lights start to come on. It doesn't happen instantaneously because we actually go through a boot sequence first. But we will cover all of that in the next video, which is using your FlightBox. Thank you very much.